All right, it is 7:05. I'm gonna call this meeting to order. I am Deb Travis. I am the chair of Bronx Community Board 8 Parks and Recreation Committee. I have a few housekeeping items for the discussion. As a community board committee, we loosely follow Robert's Rules of Order. We will be following the agenda that was previously distributed. If we open a topic to general discussion, we ask that if you would like to speak, that you raise your hand and I will call on you. Our goal is to have a good, robust discussion of our agenda items. However, if we have a lot of people who would like to speak on an individual topic, in the interest of time, you may only get to speak once. So you will want to make sure to make it count. If you're on Zoom, to raise your hand, you'll select reactions at the bottom of the screen. If you're on the phone, it's *6 to mute and unmute yourself, and *9 to raise and lower your hand. We start with roll call of the committee. Bob Bender.
Here.
Carol Blake.
Here.
Miriam Filer. Not here. And Deb Travis, I'm chair, I'm here. Are there any other community board members here? Just raise your hand. Oops. As far as, are there any elected officials? Oh, I got one person.
Mm-hmm.
I see 646732. Yeah, are you a community board member?
Julie Reyes.
Oh, hey, Julie. Okay.
Oh.
Welcome.
Thank
Julie
you.
Reyes is our community board chair, so we are delighted to have her on the call this evening. Are there any elected officials or representatives of elected officials? All right. So for representatives from agencies, I have Alberto Milan from Parks, Stephanie Ehrlich from the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance and the Van Cortlandt Park Administrator, Margaret Holmes from the Van Cortlandt House Museum, Giulietta Fiore from the Historic House Trust, and Christina Taylor from the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance. Is there anybody else who is with the city agency that I am missing?
Marlisa Wise. I'm also from New York City Parks.
I'm sorry, what was that again? Your name?
My name is Marlisa Wise.
Got it. I see it. All right. So next, I would like to approve the minutes of the April 22nd, 2026 committee meeting, which were distributed to committee members ahead of the meeting. We did not meet in May, so there's only the April meeting. Are there does anyone on the committee have any changes to the minutes? Right. So if there's no objections, I move to approve the minutes by unanimous consent. And the minutes of the April 26th committee meeting are unanimously approved. Chair's report. So I just wanted to provide an update on the Tibbetts Advisory Group. It's called TAG. TAG had another meeting, which they've done periodically throughout the whole process of developing the Tibbetts Brook Park and Greenway along the Major Deegan. So the Tibbetts Advisory Group met on June 16th, and I attended the meeting to provide an update on the construction of the Tibbetts Brook daylighting project, so for those who may not have been following this, the daylighting project will run from Van Cortlandt Park to West 225th Street, and then the pipe will divert water directly from 225th into the river, the Harlem River. Actually, I think it starts at 230th, correct? The pipe.
Yes. Yeah.
This is a $150 million project, and it is just wrapping up procurement. The construction contract has been awarded to Railroad Construction Company, which apparently does more than just constructing railroads, as this name might suggest. They are expected to begin mobilizing in August, September, October, and the construction will continue through August of 2030. Phase 1 began last year with work in Van Cortlandt Lake to address invasives. This was phase 1 of this overall Tibbetts Brook daylighting project. Also flood net sensors were installed near the dam in Van Cortlandt Park to track and measure high water events. Stephanie could maybe tell us how that worked yesterday. And then DEP is going to also be switching to a regular mechanical harvesting method for the water chestnuts, which seem to be almost winning, but they will not win in the end. But they will be continuing with ongoing removal of the water chestnuts and the removal of these invasives through fall of 2028. And then as far as the overall project, the Tibbetts Brook Daylighting Project, once it's completed, it's going to divert 2.1 billion with a B gallons of water from the lake, Van Cortlandt Lake or Hester and Pura Mill Pond, from the New York sewer, which goes to the water treatment plant, and we'll send it directly to the Harlem River, which makes sense since it's clean, perfectly natural water. This is really an important project because heavy rain, like we just experienced, when there's heavy rain, the sewers fill up with water from the rain. And if it's already got lake water in it, 215 million gallons of sewer go directly into the Harlem River annually, because all of this lake water is going into the sewer as well. So by diverting the lake water through directly to the Harlem River, we increase the amount of capacity for our sewer system as a whole, and then that will eliminate potentially, or at least drastically reduce the amount of sewer water going into the Harlem River that's untreated during these events. So an excellent project all around. So that was their update. So that the big news, really, the headline is the construction will start we'll start to see mobilization in August, September, and then construction will start in earnest kind of around November or so. And then speaking of construction, Marble Hill Playground synthetic turf replacement project is complete. The turf is done. That is a project that started back in April of 2024 and cost $421,000 and was funded by the mayor's office. So it's exciting that that is done. I know the kids were very eager to get out there and start using it. And then I had a couple of dates. The stewards of Henry Hudson Park, and I know Jody Colon's on the call. She'll probably want to add to this more during new business. But stewards of Henry Hudson Park will be hosting tree and garden care volunteer days in Henry Hudson Park throughout the summer. The next ones are Wednesday, June 24th from 6 to 7:30. Sunday, June 28th. From 9 to 11:30 in the morning, and Tuesday, June 30th, from 6 to 7:30 in the morning, or 6 to 7:30 in the evening. And so with that, I know we have Marlisa on the call. I will pivot over to the Parks Department to talk about the stadium plan and the necessities of the remove safety concerns around the stadium. Does somebody need me to unmute that?
Alberto, I'm not sure if you were giving any intro or if you'd like me to jump right into recapping the previous presentation.
I think you're going to be the best person to do the recap. So I mean, I guess I can set the groundwork a little bit for the previous meeting. So back in April, the Parks Department came to this committee with a presentation about the condition of the Van Cortlandt Park Stadium. The stadium is in very poor condition, and the general consensus is that it will need to be torn down. At that meeting, we got a bit of a high-level view of the state of it. I thought it would be, since that meeting, there's been a lot of concern about what's going to happen and wanting more specifics. A lot of folks were not on that call. It was really the first time that the community found out about the condition of the stadium and kind of the intentions of the Parks Department. And so we asked the Parks Department to come back today, and they very generously agreed to come back to just give the presentation again of the conditions currently of the park, and to to explain the rationale for why the stadium would need to be removed and how they're approaching the next phases of what will come next. next after the stadium is removed and how they're approaching the southern end of the park. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Marlisa, who is the landscape architect, well, not landscape, our actual building architect, yes, of who was hired by the Parks Department to do an assessment.
Hi. So can you all see the screen in the image here? Should say
Start
master
breaking up
planning.
a little bit, but I can see you.
Okay. Let me know if it starts to break up. I can always try to turn off my video to see if that helps. Just to clarify one thing, yes, I am an architect. I work for the Parks Department, so I was not brought on a director of architecture. Parks hired a full consultant engineering. So we're going to recap the big picture, the history of this master planning study, and what we've learned about the stadium building and what our next steps look like for the agency and the community. So the master planning process was a 5-stage process. First was getting on site, understanding like health and safety issues on site. The second was running a series of investigative studies. So we looked at everything from stormwater to structural concerns, soil conditions, topography, and borings to understand subsurface conditions. Then we went through laboratory analysis. So this was bringing samples of all the materials into offsite labs, testing them for all kinds of contaminants so that we understood, do we have lead? Do we have asbestos? Do we have chemicals in the soil that we should know about and do something? Then the fourth step was the community engagement process. So there was a series of public engagement meetings online. There was a month-long survey. There were a series of on-site pop-up events where we were trying to hear as much as we could from the community and the park users about what they love in the park today, what they think working better, so that all of that could be incorporated into the master planning study. And then the fifth step was,
Real
yes.
quick, maybe try turning off your video. The sound is still a little bit distorted. I'm getting reports from folks that they're having trouble hearing you.
Okay. I hope that that helps.
So far, so good.
Excellent. So the fifth step was looking at the master planning of the building. So we looked at what would be possible reconstructing the new building, the existing building, and then 2 models for a new building. One, a membership model, like a recreation center, and the other, a non-membership building, more like community center. So I'm going to walk you through the kind of 5 steps, and then we can talk about what the next steps for the stadium building and surrounding site are. So the master planning study began by trying to understand the surrounding context. The site, as I think everyone on the call is probably familiar with, abuts Broadway, is surrounded by schools, Manhattan College, Manhattan University, Horace Mann, a number of large residential buildings, and also in close proximity to other recreation amenities like the soccer fields and Van Cortlandt Pool. On the left, you see some of the amenities in Van Cortlandt Park, the Van Cortlandt House Museum, the Brewery Grounds, Old Putnam Trail. So we're really trying to understand how the stadium building fits into the immediate surrounding context. The team did historical research to understand how the site was constructed. This was initially a swamp. The city used trash to fill in the swamp and create a site for the stadium building and for the recreation uses that surround it. This development was during the 1930s. So if you look on the left, you have the topographic map 1874, and you can very relates to the brook and the surrounding context. Looking at the existing site, we're at over 20 acres for this site. The majority of it is sports fields and programmed outdoor facilities. Then we have about 11% circulation, 25% lawn, unprogrammed green space, and only 2% of it, about 15,000 square feet, is the existing stadium building. And you have some photos on the left of the current site conditions. In the investigations, the team looked to understand what constraints exist on the site. They looked at existing trees to ensure that they would be preserved. We have some beautiful mature trees that we never want to interfere with in any future development on site. We need to make sure we keep the permeable surfaces so that drainage can happen naturally into the soils, that we avoid the steep slopes and not disrupt the Tibbetts Brook embankment, that we invest in improving stormwater drainage systems. This is something that Parks and DEP are working closely on across the city. Excavations, if contaminated soils are encountered, are disposed of in accordance with all EPA regulations. These investigations into the building itself looked at a series of components from the foundation, structure, MEP, hazardous materials, and then also understanding code compliance. The summary of this is that the existing stadium building is deteriorated beyond the point that it can be repaired and saved. So I do want to talk through why that is. The existing building is built on a shallow foundation. As you saw in the earlier slides, the site is a marsh that was filled in with trash. Contemporary engineering would design a specialized foundation, a micropile foundation with many, many deep cylindrical supports. The shallow foundation will continue to subside and cause cracking throughout the structure. So the concrete is severely compromised on all of the exterior facades, as well as the supporting columns and structural beams on the interior of the stadium building. The mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems are, for the most part, original to the 1930s construction. So they are not functional or have already been removed, would all require complete comprehensive replacement. We did find lead and asbestos as well as rats. So there's a lot of contamination on the inside of the building, all of which would need to be abated. The existing footprint is only about 15,000 square feet. So that would very likely not support the uses that the community would want to see here. That footprint would not allow us to provide the kinds of programming that we heard from the community during our engagement sessions. And we should also say that, as expected, the existing building is not code compliant and does not meet energy codes, current accessibility regulations. We also studied the existing drainage. Currently, it's sufficient, but any large-scale redevelopment of this would want to improve drainage and be even better at detaining stormwater during flood events. So we do want to share some of the images of what was looked at in detail so that you're able to see both damages that are visible from the exterior on the bleachers and the facade, but also some images of what's happening on the inside. So if you see on that underside bleachers image, how the rebar is exposed and corroded. On the exterior, you see the cracking and the spalling concrete. This is happening because the original materials that were used to build the building are of very poor quality. The concrete mixture that was used does not have the proper ratios, and it is allowing water to move through the concrete, then which is rusting and corroding. As the building freezes and thaws, cracks open and expand, thus worsening the deterioration and causing it to happen more rapidly. So we have cracks, rusting, concrete spalls, and new cracks forming. We like to share this plan to show where the areas of deterioration, structural deterioration, are located. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, this image is as if you're above the building looking down at the bleachers. And in red, you can see all of the areas where the
Lisa, I
structural
think you're on
concrete.
a different slide. There you go.
Yeah, that's correct.
Oh,
There you go.
are you seeing task 2
Yep, now we
with
see
the
it.
diagram of the stadium? Okay,
Yep.
great. Thank you.
Yep.
So the areas shown in red are where the structural concrete is deteriorating. So if you see in the axonometric on the right-hand side, those are the columns, beams, and shallow foundation points that are in severe disrepair. As I mentioned, the existing material itself will continue to deteriorate through expansion and contraction, water infiltration, and rusting. So this condition will require ongoing maintenance and repairs to keep the building standing. So this is an ongoing investment that will be required as long as the building remains in place. So we do have these irreparable structural issues. The location of the building in its current location also precludes the agency from, in the future, increasing the size of the sports fields to meet NCAA regulations. So that's a piece we didn't talk about extensively in the last meeting, but I do want to make sure that's kind of understood. If the building were to be kept and just stabilized, slowing the deterioration, that would prevent us from meeting NCAA regulations. If the building were demolished, it opens the possibility of, in the future, creating NCAA regulation fields. As I mentioned earlier, we did extensive testing for hazardous materials and did find throughout the building asbestos, lead-based paint, PCBs, and mold. So the public has not been able to access the interior of the building for quite some time. Park staff who must enter for maintenance do so only when understood that there is no contamination on the exterior of the building. The exterior was tested to the same level as the interior. So we do not have the danger of asbestos or lead on the exterior of the building. The MEP systems are either missing or failed, would require comprehensive replacement. And we would like to talk a little bit about the facade itself. During the master planning study, we found there were immediate safety measures that needed to be taken. So, as I mentioned, keeping the stadium building closed to the public, ensuring any park staff wore protective equipment, and then also installing wire netting along the facade of the building, which is currently used as handball courts. So as the netting was being installed and we continued to move through the master planning effort, we did a series of community engagement events. So We had the large virtual meeting, pop-up events on site, and we had a month-long online survey. And we, tried to increase community awareness of this through on-site posters and flyers. We did get over 1,000 responses. So while we know that not everyone was able to engage at this moment in the process, we do feel like we got great participation, and we want to keep that conversation going as the project moves forward. We heard from people who live and go to school and work near the park, as well as folks who travel to the park just for the recreational reasons. It's a special park that provides a lot. We did hear that people are really enjoying the handball, the walking, the jogging, and that they do want to keep the stadium building's character, but also see that it needs improvement. During our online survey and pop-up events, we heard that, again, walking, jogging, and handball were the most popular activities, and then outdoor sports being track and field, soccer, baseball. There was most interest in providing restrooms and better lighting and more seating. To develop options for membership and non-membership facility, we solicited a lot of input on what types of programs, both indoor and outdoor, the community would want to see. So this slide is organizing the things we heard most frequently for sports fields, and then outdoor facilities. Indoor facilities, we heard a desire for men's and women's locker rooms and spectator restrooms. We heard interest in multi-purpose rooms, media rooms, classrooms. And then the items that have a red asterisk here would only be possible in a membership model like a rec center. So we did hear from some people that they would want a more robust rec center facility, which would have things like a gymnasium, cardio, and fitness rooms. We would, of course, also need some spaces for staff to support the programming and operations. So the consultant engineering team pulled all of this together, the information we have about the site, the input and feedback we heard about what's desired. And we laid out option 1, keeping the existing building. We see that it would not provide space for even a quarter of what is being requested. We also know that structurally, it's not a feasible or viable option. So then we explored 2 different alternatives. Non-membership model at around 22,000 square feet, or a membership program nearly double the size. So here you can see the 3 kind of schemes that the team was working through. So again, keeping the existing building is not viable. Option 2 would be a new code compliant building. As you can see, it would be moved closer to Broadway, allowing future enlargement of the fields to NCAA size. We would not be able to have all kinds of programs, like a gym or weight rooms in a non-membership model, but we would be able to provide a significant amount of programming for the community. The goal would be to keep the existing character, retain some of the historic elements, and reference the stadium building. And then the third option that the team explored was that much larger 44,000 square foot rec center-like facility, pulling that into the middle of the site. And so that is the recap of the complete master planning study. In our last meeting, we talked about next steps and how the agency is advocating for funding. I'm going to turn my camera back on I hope, can everyone still hear? My connection's not too spotty?
So far, so good.
Yes? Okay, great. So in the last meeting, we tried to, explain that this is not a project that has funding. The agency did advocate for funding in the last round of mayoral requests. We did not receive the funding to demolish and build a new stadium building. So at this point, the agency is continuing to monitor the structural stability. We have a team of structural engineers who will be going out and doing another evaluation in the next 2 months to ensure that the agency has kind of constant monitoring. And if there are any further safety measures that need to be taken, we're aware of them right away and can implement them. The intent is to keep the handball courts open as long as possible, while also keeping everyone safe. So that's why we need to keep the structural monitoring going, while advocating for the funding to demolish the building and replace it with some better amenities for the community. Again, for folks who were not here at the last meeting, we talked a lot about what an interim solution might be. If the building comes down, would we want to have handball courts there right away, while advocating for funding for a larger facility? Or would we want to build temporary handball courts elsewhere in the park and then demolish the building? So we talked through some of those things. What we heard the most was the importance of the handball courts, not only to the immediate community, but people who come from all over the city to play there. We also heard that the idea of relocating the handball courts to the north area where there's a spray shower was not something that the community board or folks on the call thought was a good idea. And so now we're in this place of trying to monitor the structural stability, continue to advocate for funding. And I think in this meeting and in future meetings, we want to keep hearing from the community what scope is most important for any future building so that we can together advocate for funding for the right scope. This master planning study was not a design exercise. We didn't say this building should be built or that building, membership, non-membership. We were studying the options and we want to now share them with you so that that conversation can keep going. Stephanie, Alberto, if there's anything that I've missed, please feel free to jump in. I tried to cover a lot.
So Marlisa, maybe let me just jump in. I've got a few questions I think might be helpful for the group. If you could kill your video and go back to the presentation real quick, but I know that it's a little bit of an eye chart looking at the second to the last chart where you've got the 3 graphs of option 1, 2, and 3 with the colors. And so I thought it would be helpful if you could just walk us through, like the orange bars are staffing spaces, and what are examples of that? So it's like the one right before that, the slide just previous to this one, but also this slide too. I'll have you come back to it just to orient us on the map. So Broadway is at the top of the map above each option, and Van Cortlandt Park South is on the left on that map. And then this chart, I thought it would just be helpful, just focusing on option 2 and option 3. We've got our light green, we've got our zesty lime green, we've got our chartreuse. Like, what do each of those colors represent, and what are the examples of things that are in those bars for everybody, for folks who may not quite be able to look at these quickly and understand the difference between the 22,000 square foot option and the 44,000 square foot option?
Absolutely. And thank you for helping me make this clearer. So two green up here correspond to outdoor programming. So the very lightest are sports fields. So if, for example, in option 2 and 3, the building is built somewhere else, that allows us to have the NCAA baseball field, softball field, and track and field. So those things are possible in these two options. Then in the green, the darker green, outdoor facilities. So these are not just sports fields, but a wider variety. So both in option 1, 2, and 3, outdoor facilities could be either reconstructed or built new
Is that,
around
does that
the
essentially represent what we
existing
have
buildings.
now?
So the item,
Does that
no,
represent what we have?
it
No.
does not just reflect what is. No, it represents the total of what we heard during community engagement events was desired. So it includes things like bank shot, skate park, parkour, picnic spaces, a wide range of outdoor facilities that we heard through the community engagement process were desired in the park.
And so then when I see
So then the other 3 colors, the paint.
So on the chart, it says 100% all the way at the end. Does that mean that like say option 2 would be able to do 100% of the outdoor facilities that were requested in general or asked for by the community during the outreach session? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right. So when we look, for example, at option 1, we see how the limited existing footprint would only let us do half of the sports support and staff rooms and none of the community spaces. It would only let us do half of the sports fields because its location prevents NCAA sizes. In both option 2 and 3, we're able to, in the future, enlarge those fields and provide 100% of those desired sports field amenities. So then again, where you start to see the differences in 2 and 3, option 2, non-membership, right? We can get about 75% of the sports support spaces. In option 3, we have all those items, plus having locker room facilities to support teams coming to play. If we're looking at the community spaces, in our non-membership 22,000 square foot building, we would have multi-purpose restrooms, classrooms, media room, lobby, and offices. And that's half of what we heard during the community engagement process, including gymnasium, indoor track, cardio, strength, spin, locker rooms. So it becomes a much larger facility and would need to be a membership-based model. Both options 2 and 3 would need to accommodate the same staff operations, and so both would accommodate 100% of those.
So option 3 would have a much larger building. So is there anything we give up in terms of fields or outdoor facilities by having a much larger building?
No.
Okay. And then do you want to talk a little bit about, quickly while we're here, I know some folks were concerned about the membership cost being prohibitive for the community. Can you describe quickly kind of what we're talking about in terms of cost when we say that there's a cost to the membership model?
So a membership model would use the exact same pricing structure as all of New York City Parks rec centers. So, Alberto, you may know the numbers off the top of your head. I believe it is, oh, you've got it. There we go.
So we have free membership for youth and young adults ages 24 and under. It's $25 for seniors ages 62 and over, and people with disabilities and U.S. veterans, and it's $100 to $150 for adults ranging 25 to 61.
And that's annually.
Yes, correct.
Then can you just go quickly next to the next slide? And that way we can kind of orient everyone in terms of where in the park this project would be. And then if you could speak to whether the playground or the existing playground, the existing skate park, whether those things would be impacted by this project.
Yes. So on the far left, if you can see my cursor, this is the current configuration. This is the current stadium building location. So the handball courts are on this side. Broadway runs along the top of your screen here. So if you're walking towards the stadium building and past the handball courts, you're coming from Broadway down the screen to this red bar representing the stadium building. In option 2, the team studied the 22,000 square foot model in approximately the same location, but pulled just enough closer to Broadway to allow future NCAA fields. In option 3, they studied pulling the building all the way into the middle of the park. So the intent here was that in a much larger building, it would support the sports fields as well as the playground and skate park and be more centrally located. So they were looking at 2 different locations.
So using these maps, the multi-use area, the playground and the skate park would not be impacted, but it looks like the children's spray area and the seating that's next to Broadway would be impacted, at least by option 3. Is that correct?
That is correct. So in option 3, a larger scope of work would be required because as you say, we would be bringing the building into the middle. We would have to relocate and, redesign the track, the sports fields to the south. And so with the option 2, we're able to do that project with less disruption to the overall use of the park.
I guess I haven't mentioned the basketball courts too. Would the basketball courts be impacted by option 2 or option 3?
So just to take a small step back, this master planning study was looking at the full 20-acre site. So their proposals included significant amounts of landscape design. They were designing for new playgrounds and skate parks. They proposed a plan for the entire park. That is a much, 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 much bigger project that will take many years and many, many millions of dollars. I think the immediate need is for us to address the stadium building because we have learned through this study that it is in such a state of deterioration that it will continue to worsen and it will, at a certain point, force us to close the areas immediately surrounding it, which would, limit or potentially eliminate use of those handball courts. And we really don't want to get to that point because we see how important handball courts are. So the conversation that we want to be having right now is how can we best ensure public safety and continuous use of handball courts while advocating for the larger funding needed for, an option 2 or option 3 approach.
So, I think one of the things that we heard from the community was that, there are a lot of different constituencies that use this 20-acre site. And so, that while people understand, I think, well, we'll hear from everyone, but that, in general, people can like reason with and hear you out about the condition of the stadium. I think all of the individuals who use the different components of this site all have their own individual concerns about what will happen to the basketball courts, the soccer fields, the track, etc. And that even if you take the stadium down, for example, in an early stage, like just stage 1, take the stadium down and address the handball and racquetball, that there's still other parts that are very close to that, like the basketball or the spray showers or the seating that may be impacted right away. We haven't had any conversation about. That's the first piece. And then the second piece is that I think a lot of people would feel, I know myself, I can speak for myself, I would feel much better having some sense of what that 20-acre plan is for option 2 and option 3, even if it's preliminary, so that we can have our minds rested assured that the basketball courts will fit in there someplace, or where they will be if the stadium is in the new, if we go with option 3, how does that impact the basketball courts or the skate park, etc. The skate park, I know just from when I first was on the Parks Committee, took a decade to build. It took a very, very long time, and so I would hate to see anything happen to it, and I think we shouldn't be thinking so. It's certainly not something you can, even in a theoretical sense, think about moving. That seems like a fool's errand because we can't rebuild everything, I don't think. But I'm open to being convinced. What I'm saying is that we would like to see kind of what Parks is imagining for the whole 20-acre site. Marlisa, have you seen these documents? And is it possible to get them from the Parks Department so that we can have a presentation on that and provide more community feedback on it?
So first, yes, I have seen the preliminary layouts that the master planning study did for the landscape, the full 20-acre site. I think we would be able to show them. I don't know, Alberto, if you want to chime in on how to best do that.
I can circle back and see if we can share with the community board. I'll get back to you tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, I'm just a big fan of kind of measuring 2 or 3 times and cutting once and getting as much community input on the first 2 measurements. And so I think, I don't want it to be lost that you did do a really wonderful job with getting community outreach a couple of years ago. I remember that we participated in that, and it was really awesome. And I really thank you for the amount of effort that went into that. Bankroll Park Alliance and Parks did a great job with that. It seems like there's an opportunity here, now that you know more, to say more and to get more input in the specifics, so that way people are not worrying that at some point they're going to turn around and their basketball courts are going to be gone, or their soccer field is going to be out of service, or that they can at least have a sense that what might impact it, so that we know what to keep an eye out for, so that they can plan. So I just want to put that out there, that we'll follow up with you, I guess, tomorrow, Alberto, on sharing that larger master plan. And this is the last Parks Committee meeting for this board year, but we'll be back in September, and we can hopefully come back with a presentation on that in September. That would be awesome. Or community, or an opportunity for more community input, just in general, another community input session.
That would be great.
That would be awesome. So a couple of questions that I've been fielding. One is Orchard Beach. There was just a huge renovation of Orchard Beach. What is different about Orchard Beach versus this stadium?
Sorry, is the question like, why were we able to preserve the Orchard Beach Pavilion and not this building?
Exactly.
Because this building was built with materials that are of very poor quality, and it was built on a site that is a swamp stuffed with trash, not actual stable soil, and was built on a shallow foundation that is not appropriate for the soil conditions. So it is due to the original materials and the site on which this particular building was built and the foundation that it rests on.
Okay. Because I mean, when just as you look at it from the outside, I mean, Robert Moses is behind both. I assume he probably used the same contractor, and then Orchard Beach is also landfill, so that they seem like they're very similar in those ways, and so that was where the question was coming from. When you were doing the cost benefit analysis, did you put together a rough estimate of what it would cost to repair?
No, because there is no way to repair it.
Okay.
There is no cost benefit analysis that was run, because to quote unquote save the building, you would rip it down all the way to the foundations, remove the foundations, and build a new building. We cannot save the structure. We cannot use the foundations. There are not any utility services that are appropriate. Saving the building would mean demolishing it. We cannot save the building.
Anybody on the
This
committee?
is not a cost analysis or a cost driven.
Bob.
Yeah, I'm still trying to come to terms with how we're going to preserve all the existing elements like the skate park, the playground, the basketball courts, etc. And yet, under options 2 and 3, we're going to have a much larger stadium. I mean, I'm willing to believe that's possible, but I really would like to see the plans, as Deb has mentioned, and see, see some schematic of how all of this is actually going to be done, so that we have a bigger stadium, and yet we don't lose all the other elements around it, from the spray shower to all the items I just mentioned. So that's concern number one. I'd really like to see. I'd like to be able to visualize how all of this is going to be done. The second thing, and I don't know that you're prepared at this point to be specific about it, but I would have to think to have a general idea of how long it's going to take down the stadium, replace the stadium, and how large an area around the stadium would have to be closed off for safety reasons while all of this construction work is going on. I mean, I imagine there would have to be some safety perimeter around the existing stadium site that would probably close off not just the handball courts, but possibly other recreational spaces in that area. Do you have a sense of that at this point?
Those are a lot of good questions connected. So I'm going to try to answer each one, and please let me know if I miss anything. So the first question about wanting to see the plans for the landscape around the stadium building. As Alberto said, we're going to go back, confirm that we can do that with, whoever within Parks, make sure that we come back to you with as much information as possible so we can share everything that came out of the master plan. Then the next question was about kind of would to be an area around the building itself to allow demolition, to allow a contractor to have a staging area. We do not have staging drawings. as I mentioned earlier, we don't have an actual design. We have the master planning studies. So we don't have the level of detail that a construction set would have. Where we are really clearly laying out the areas of a contractor access. To do that, we need to have a scope for the project. We need to know, is it option 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 that we haven't developed with the community yet. Speaking only for myself, I hope that we are not going to just take option 2 or option 3 and say this is what we all need to get behind and push for. I hope that this is a conversation where, you know, as was mentioned, we continue to share as much as we can about the master planning study, and we hear more about what's desired, what the priorities are. And then as, you know, community and public agency, we can try to hone in on the scope that's most important, identify any conflicts that were mentioned about like basketball court. We can dig into how to preserve access and make sure that we're not disrupting surrounding areas or preserving access to all of the other recreational facilities. So we're not there yet. We don't have that level of detail, but I actually think it's a good thing that we don't have that level of detail yet. That would mean we've made a lot of decisions already. And I think it's better that we're working through this together. But again, I'm just speaking for myself. So Alberto, Stephanie, feel free to jump in.
No, we agree with you 100%. We want the community input because we want to create a space that works for the community.
Did I hit on all the questions, or was there anything else that I missed?
Is that everything for you, Bob?
Well, one other question is, I realize that until there's a decision about what's going to go there, there's really no way to know the amount of time it will take or the amount of money it will take. But with regard to the demolition of the existing stadium, do you have a rough assessment of A, how long that would take, and B, what that's going to cost? And you mentioned this is going to be an expensive project, and obviously it is going to be, but the demolition would be step 1. Do you have any sense of what that's going to cost? And you mentioned that getting mayoral money is going to be necessary to realize this project. So, you know, the time for the demolition and the cost of the demolition. I'm curious about that.
So demolition would certainly be under a year, probably closer to 6 months for the full process. It's a lot faster to take something down than to build it from new. So we would want to make that period as short as possible to minimize the disruption on site. And that's something that we have different tools to do. Sometimes we use an early incentive and tell the contractor, hey, if you can get this done twice as fast as typical, you can get a little bit of extra money. And if it's worth it to the community to have less disruption, that's something we can do. And in terms of cost for demolition only, you know, we haven't bid this out to contractors. So we don't have an exact price. But I think we can, again, go back and see if we can start to give estimates and share estimates with the community board, and, you know, through that vehicle, the larger community.
But you would.
I really do want to come
mayoral
back
money.
with this.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, I want to make sure that we come back with as much information that addresses the questions we hear tonight. So we're gonna, in addition to seeing how much visual information, how many drawings we can share, we'll also make sure that we get clarity on how much cost information we're able to share.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering if you guys, the funding that you guys are looking for, is it for, demolition and then, the new plan separately, or are you looking to fund that completely before you get started?
So, what the agency requested, around the turn of the new year, when all of the agencies put in requests, we requested funding that would be enough to demolish the existing stadium building and pursue a project of roughly the same size and scope as option 2. We did not put in a request for the entire 20-acre site because that number was so huge that there was just no way it was going to get funded. And we wanted to ask for what would be needed to demolish and make the site safe, but also have enough to put a better amenity back.
And then just a clarifying question. The information that you're giving us now with the community interest and the different options, is that just kind of like going deeper into information that you already had in April, or is this new information gathered since then?
This is more detail on what we shared in April at the last community board meeting.
All my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, do you have anything?
Are there any safety barricades that are up currently?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Are there any safety barricades that are up currently?
Safety issues right now on site?
No,
So you're
like
asking-
barricades.
Oh, barricades.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for not hearing you the first time. We do not at this time need to put up any barricades to keep people away from the facade or off of the bleachers. It is safe to be on the bleachers. It is safe to be around the building. We're going to keep monitoring the building. Like I said, we're sending out another group of structural engineers to do another round of analysis and make sure that if anything has changed over the last year, we know right away and we can put in additional safety measures. But at this time, it is safe to be on the bleachers, it is safe to be around the building, and it is safe to play handball.
But you do have some netting up at the top of the building.
Yes.
To prevent anything from falling down on the handball court.
Correct.
And then you do have a rat infestation. Are you going to be doing anything to eliminate the rats? Since I assume they don't just stay inside the stadium, but they also make periodic visits to everybody else.
That is part of Parks' maintenance. So as I mentioned, there's every once in a while, Parks staff need to go into these buildings. They wear all the PPE, and some of the things that they're doing are to address those ongoing issues.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody on the call who has any questions regarding the presentation or the stadium? Just raise your hand. I see we've got Michael Moblin.
Hello.
There you go. Yeah, the floor is yours, Michael.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know how this all impacts the planned capital project to replace the turf on the field.
Great question.
We've been expecting for about 3 years, and then we're told that it was going to be tied into this larger project, and then told was actually no, it's a separate project. But we didn't make the cuts the last 2 years because of contract reasons, and we did get a substantial set of repairs this early part of the spring that we appreciate, but was quite disruptive. And we're really concerned that while it was a great job, it's not going to last much longer. And we understand that obviously this is a much larger capital project, needs a lot of money for the stadium and all that stuff. We're very sensitive to all that, but the turf field and the use of the turf field by the kids in the community, a safe redone turf field. What's the story with that?
The master planning study is not related to the turf project, so they will continue separately. This does not impact the turf project.
And when is the turf project going to actually happen?
So I don't know if Stephanie or Alberto, you have the schedule. Unfortunately, as my role as director of architecture, my mind is in the building projects. So while I'm aware of that, I don't know their exact timeline. Alberto or Stephanie, do you know the timing for that? If not, we can provide it back to the community board tomorrow as a follow-up.
Yeah, I think.
Michael, it hasn't changed, right? Alberto, it's 2027 is the planned time for the.
Yes, correct. I'm trying to get the exact month, but it is scheduled for 2027.
Yeah, as soon as you know the exact month would be really helpful, because getting permits and the dependency of permits and all of that, it's a real nightmare. So the sooner we know, the better.
Yeah, if you could provide the month, Alberto, that would be great. When last we met with Parks regarding the turf replacement, it was 2027. That was all we had, all the information I had at that time. Michael, do you have any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
This is Irma Garcia from Manhattan University. Just
Yeah, can you hold 1 second? Jody Cologne has her hand up first, and then I'll go right back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, Jody.
Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Thank you for the presentation. I'm really enjoying that there's so much detail up front before design processes is happening. I just had a question about the recreation center capacity. How many people would be able to use it in your big alternative with the membership?
In option 2 without membership, or in option 3?
In both, because there's not that many recreation centers in the Bronx, and I think 2 of them are still closed. So I was just wondering what the capacity would be, because there seems to be a lack of facilities for people.
I don't know the occupancy counts off the top of my head, but I can say that this option 3, for example, is roughly the size of the new rec center that's being built in Walter Gladwin Park. So we definitely recognize that this is under-resourced for recreation, and St. Mary's is reopening very soon. That we are building a new recreation center in Soundview Park, and we're building a new recreation center in Walter Gladwin Park. So we definitely want to make sure that we're advocating for more recreation centers in the Bronx.
Great. And then about the NC2A locker room facilities, how often would those be used, and would that impact residents' access to the non-membership or membership option?
So in a membership option, the locker rooms would be supporting people going there to work out. It would be supporting the recreation center members. When we're looking at locker rooms just for sports teams, those would be designed within the building to minimize any impact or crossing circulation, so that if you're going to your art class in the multi-purpose room, or your yoga class down the hall, you're not crossing paths with 20 sweaty teenagers. We recognize that there are different groups that need to use the facility, and that we lay out the design to make sure everyone has the best experience for what they're there for.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you, Jody. Next up is Irma Garcia. Is she still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. First of all, Marlissa and Stephanie and Alberto, incredible job, right, laying this out. And it gave me a really good idea what, as a community member in the area of Van Cortlandt, it gives me a good idea of what we can do for the community. It's incredible what you're doing. My question is, what is the timeline? Just what's the next steps? How does that look? I know there's going to be more questions, more answers, more questions, more answers, more community input. So what does that look like? And we, as a neighbor to Van Cortlandt, are all in to help out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, or I think Melissa's froze. There's she's
Okay,
back.
there you go.
Can
Thank you so much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Great. I was just saying that Alberto may be able to speak to this, from his role with the Borough Commissioner's Office. For my role in capital projects, our next steps are doing the structural investigations, annually. This one in the next 2 months, making sure that we keep the facility safe and we keep as much recreation around the stadium open for as long as possible. At the same time, advocating for money. That is definitely a place where the agency and the community can work in tandem, so that elected officials hear that this is an important thing, that they should advocate for funding. The agency will continue to prioritize this. I believe the intent is to go back in, I think, the fall and try to get more money, but I don't know, Alberto, again, if you're able to share information about how that advocacy is happening.
Yeah, so we have been in contact with a lot of the local electeds, and we did share the presentation with them, and we are actively trying to get funding. But first, we do need to select an option and see what path we're going to move forward, so that we can continue that advocacy.
So on that point, Alberto, that's where it would be really helpful to get more community input. So
Yes.
We would love to help facilitate that any way we can, or to encourage or advocate for funding for a phase 2 of the community outreach that you did before, which I thought was so effective. Similar to, when the DOT was planning the Harlem River Greenway, they came to us and they did a round 1 of like, what would you imagine for a greenway? But then once they had their routes planned and they came back to the whole community with, here are 3 routes we're considering, tell us what is good and bad about these routes, and what would you do differently. And I thought that was just really, really effective, because allowed the community to just specifically say, this corner won't work for this reason, my opinion. And then somebody else comes in and says, no, this corner is perfect for this reason and that reason. And you can figure out how to balance those things out. So I think that would be awesome. We'd love to have anything you need from us in terms of, advocating for funding for that kind of community outreach, so that we can really have everybody involved and have a voice in whether it's option 2 or option 3 or option 5. Right. And with that, I see no other hands, and so I want to thank. Oh, I see. Paul, do you want to close this out with a last question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that as all this planning is moving forward, and these really neat and great facilities come online, and you expand to these NCAA requirements, and then I want to make sure that the community programs, the youth programs, don't get overshadowed or squeezed out, in light of having NCAA tournaments or track meets or softball or baseball or football, whatever it is that, the youth, the community, the parents and kids aren't left by the wayside and or squeezed out because of this great new facility.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I think, because the materials that we're sharing tonight are so focused on the stadium building, we haven't shared everything that was looked at for the surrounding site. But I do want to reassure you that playground spaces, public restroom buildings, passive lawn areas, were all part of it. And so when we're able to come back with more of that detail, we really do want to hear more from you and the larger group about how to preserve and enhance what's at Van Cortlandt Park, in this piece of Van Cortlandt Park, so that everybody who uses it has an improved experience. We certainly don't want one type of program to start to overshadow or push another group out or feel like they're losing something in the.
Yeah, more my point was more to the youth soccer teams, the youth football teams, the youth baseball teams, softball teams, that they don't start to lose opportunities because these new opportunities for the NCAA and colleges are starting to want to use them and bring in bigger track meets and more funding that us, the people who are here and are part of the community, want to be able to make sure that our youth programs are able to use those fields and facilities.
Well, and Paul too, I mean, the community board is also here to advocate as well with you. And so, I think this will be a process as we go through, but making sure that everybody in the community and our elected officials, we're all here to work together to figure out how to divvy up this pie so that everybody's getting what they need. But 100% agree with you. We don't want to leave the kids behind. And then also just for folks on the call, just to do one little bit of level setting about the park's capital process, since maybe not everybody is familiar with it, but generally it's a 16-month to 2-year process for design, 16 months to 2-year process for procurement, and 16 months to 2-year process for construction is the kind of norm that we're always given for just an average, playground reconstruction. So while the stadium could be taken down probably relatively quickly and doesn't require an extensive design or procurement process, that all of these individual piece projects, this big master plan will be composed of lots of individual capital projects that will take place over the course of years and years and years, with each one of the major projects coming before the community board for input at that specific conceptual and final design level. And hopefully, and that you'll have opportunities to comment on those individual pieces as they come out over the course of our lifetimes. But that I do think it would be helpful to have that what we're advocating for is an opportunity to just start the process early, so that there's a lot of alignment going forward and lots of input about just the big master plan. So. We're not gonna, no one should go to sleep tonight worried that this will suddenly be built in 2 years and we won't have had any say in it. There are lots of other opportunities down the road. So, and with that, thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Alberta, for coming on the call tonight and coming back and answering all of our questions. I think this was a really, really helpful presentation. We really, it's 8:30 where you live too, so we appreciate you staying up and coming back and helping us, bring all this information, this really good information to the community.
We're glad to be here. Thank you for having us back, and look forward to coming back again with more materials to share. And I apologize if you heard my kids yelling about the World Cup match happening in the background.
We barely heard you, so don't worry about that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Have a good night. And next up, I want to thank, luckily these folks are historians, and so they don't mind waiting a long time. Margaret Holmes and Giulietta Fiore. Margaret Holmes is with the Van Cortlandt House Museum. She's the executive director. and Juliette Fiore with the Historic House Trust, which is the overall arching organization for all historic houses that are in all of our parks here in the city. I want to thank you both for your epic patience this evening. It does not go unnoticed, so we appreciate you. I will just say personally, I was at the Van Cortlandt House Museum, what 2 weeks ago, I think, for their most recent exhibition, and Margaret offered to come to the meeting and really talk more about it. It's really wonderful, and so I definitely took her up on an offer. So, Margaret, if you'd like to, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you for having me, and of course Julietta as well. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you in the community. We've been doing a lot of really great work at Van Cortlandt House, so I'm always happy to crow a little bit about that. In terms of our current public programming, just to give sort of a general overview about what public programming has looked like since the last time I spoke with the community board. It's grown significantly over the past 2 years. From June through December of 2024, the museum offered 17 public programs. In 2025, that number increased to 31. From January through June of this year, we've already offered 25 public programs with 11 more scheduled, and additional programs are still being added to that as well. So with that, we're on track for about 36 public programs for 2026. Over this same time period, museum attendance overall has increased by 38%. So there's a tangible figure attached to the impact of this growth in public programming. So as Deb mentioned, our summer 2026 is very heavily focused around our DCLA CDF grant funded project in collaboration with Samantha Box, a Bronx-based artist. It's titled Overlapping Empires. So this is a site-wide contemporary art exhibition by Samantha Box on view at the museum through August 30th. It brings contemporary art into direct conversation with the layered histories of the house. So just for anyone who's not familiar, I'm just going to give sort of a couple sentences of historical context so you understand the exhibition's sort of reason and rationale, if you will. So the VCHM was built in 1748 as a center of a large provisioning plantation estate. The wealth and status of the Van Cortlandt family was shaped by land ownership, commerce, political power, and participation in the Atlantic systems of trade. And that history also includes slavery. So enslaved African and African descended people lived and labored here in what is now our home of the Bronx, sustaining the household, the estate, and the family's wealth. So at our nation's 250th anniversary of independence, this history complicates the stories that are often told about the American Revolution and freedom. So George Washington is sort of ubiquitous in many parts of New York City. He's part of the history of the Bronx, right? But so are the people whose labor made elite households like the Van Cortlandt estate, possible, and whose own ideas of freedom were fundamentally different from those of the men who claimed their liberty while denying it to others. So with that, Overlapping Empires looks at how empire, ideas of freedom, and systems of power continue to shape how we understand the world. And as I mentioned, it's significant being at the nation's 250th. The subtitle of the exhibition actually is The Bronx at 250. And so this is a huge part of our 250th programming. I think this critical thinking and examining these questions while being able to tie in contemporary art. This is the first time Van Cortlandt House has hosted a contemporary art exhibition. So the exhibition includes 13 related public programs that are all free. Several of them are virtual as well. Artist-led walkthroughs. There's actually one on Thursday, the 25th at 1 p.m. If anybody is interested in joining us, I do encourage that. We have another one on July 1st at 7 p.m. as well. Panel discussions are coming up. We also have a really great collaboration with BCPA and Juan Ucera called the Caribbean Connections, tying history and music together. So we produced that program for the first time last year, and we're going to bring it back as part of the programming for this exhibition this year. That's August 13th, I believe. Sorry, Christina and Stephanie. I think that's the date. 15th, perhaps. And as I mentioned, Overlapping Empires is supported by our CDF grant this year. I do want to mention that VCHM was awarded a multi-year CDF grant in fiscal year 26 confirming public support for our current and future work. And we are deeply, deeply grateful for that support. We have a couple of other, yeah.
Margaret, can you quickly say what that stands for?
Sorry?
Could you just quickly just say what the CDF, what does CDF?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. We use a lot of acronyms here. The New York City Department of Cultural Affairs Cultural Development Fund Grant Program. So we also, in addition to Overlapping Empires, have a couple of programs I want to mention. We're going to be having a Revolutionary War outdoor camp cooking demonstration on July 12th with award-winning living historian Dawn Elliott. And then Dawn's also going to come back with her partner Joel for a Toys, Games, and Dutch Raree show, which is a puppet show for children and families on August 12th. We've also been offering a series of pop-up crafts connected to, the history in some of our programs on families and kids on Sundays for some time now, and we'll continue to offer those throughout the summer as well. And admission to the museum is always free for Bronx residents, free for all visitors on Thursdays, free during Black History Month and Women's History Month. It is free throughout the month of June for both Pride and this month as well for Overlapping Empires, so that as many folks as possible can experience the exhibition. And almost all of our public programs throughout the year are free. So we do our best to sort of remove any of those economic barriers that might prohibit folks from experiencing the museum's content. So in short, that's our programming. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have that are more specific. So feel free.
Well, so thank you. All of this programming sounds awesome. I will go to your website to get the specific dates and we'll put them in the minutes so that we can help spread the word about particularly all of the 250th anniversary specific events. I know that the Revolutionary War, Nick Dabrowski has spoken of how the Revolutionary War impacted this area. Really, but like there'll be 250th anniversaries for the next two or 3 years. How does that, maybe this also segues into the capital work that'll be happening in the house. How do you see that kind of playing out over the next year or 2 or 3 with your activities and events?
Well, I think because for those of us who are familiar that our neighborhood, Kingsbridge, was a very significant area during the American Revolution. And I think it's important to continue exploring those themes not just because of the anniversary. I think because of the current time. And I think because of the significant histories of the site that we want to make sure, given some of the actions on a larger level, remain in the forefront of the stories that we're telling. So I don't have exact plans per se. I do know this year we do a Revolutionary War hike, which I hope everybody joins us because we go up into the neighborhood. It's really cool. It's called Between Enemy Lines. This year will be the 3rd time that we're offering that. We'll be doing that in September, I think, September 26th. We are also going to be focusing a lot on textiles. In short, I won't get into the weeds on that, but over the next year. And one of the pieces of textile that we have in our collection is a piece of tent that purports to be one of George Washington's tents. And there are a number of other pieces in the collection that have this sort of provenance that supposedly comes from George Washington or Martha Washington. And so one of the themes that we're going to be exploring around that sort of textile at the center is that sort of meta history, right, of provenance and things that are sort of attached to people like George Washington or say Thomas Jefferson, right, and how museums have presented those sorts of things and the different interpretations of that. So I think overall, while I don't have more specific plans for programming in the next 2 or 3 years, the themes that I'm sort of outlining right now that we've been looking at and will be continuing to look at are what you can expect. So I think a lot of sort of, again, keeping those underrepresented stories in the forefront and making sure that we continue critical thinking, because I believe that is part of a museum's job.
Any other questions on programming? I want to pivot over to the capital project
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Or
Margaret.
Juliet, Juliet, if you'd like to add, toss in.
Absolutely. I can chat about the capital project. So, first of all, Margaret, thank you so much for that wonderful kind of overview of programming. I have to say, every program that I've attended at the Van Cortlandt House Museum is just transformative. So I'm really impressed
you.
with the team's work.
Thank
So
you.
I want to give an update on the capital project. As many of you know, the museum is in need of kind of straightforward historic preservation restoration work, but it also needs some accessibility upgrades as well. So we're in the midst of design for a comprehensive capital project to address almost all of the needs at the site, or as many needs as we can possibly address on the site. Where we are at the moment is during preliminary design conversations, it became clear that the ADA compliant interventions that we believe would be beneficial for the museum, including a lift, would require additional site investigations to ensure that they don't interrupt any of the historic rubble foundations or any of the structural components of the historic museum. So we are in the middle of registering additional design funds. So we're in a little bit of a lull for design at the moment, but everybody is very committed to completing design by the end of 2027 or the very, very beginning of 2028. Then, as was kind of previously summarized, there's typically a 9-month procurement phase for construction, and then we'll kind of move into construction. So we're about 2 years out from actually breaking ground on construction, which gives us ample time to prepare. I will also say that the Historic House Trust, which is my organization, we are kind of the historic preservation technical expertise arm of supporting these historic houses. And so we currently have 24 capital projects ongoing across all 23 of our historic sites citywide. So by time we actually break ground for construction on the Van Cortlandt House Museum, we will be very well versed in what it looks like to support one of our partners through the construction process, which can be very disruptive. Obviously, safety is our number 1 concern for the staff, volunteers, and visitors. And then, of course, followed by making sure that we're doing our jobs to the best of our ability. So Margaret and I have a very close relationship. We will continue to speak as we move through design, and we will also continue to come back to the community board as we move through design and have kind of options and ideas to present for comment. But right now we're really in some of those structural investigation moments, which require us to register additional design funds.
Gotcha. So, and then also just to bring us up to speed, the fence, is the capital work on the fence, is that completely done?
Yes, the capital work for that fence is completely done, which is fantastic. I will say that there's kind of additional work, Stephanie and Margaret and I, we love the site, we love the park, and so there's always more work to be done. There's not plans at the moment, but additional pathways or gates kind of in the future would be something that we could discuss, but there currently are not plans at the moment.
Okay. And then I know we're kind of far out from it, but that, there's a staff of people, Margaret, but also folks who work in the gift shop, etc. How does during these extensive capital projects, I would expect that the museum will be closed for a year or two, the actual physical plant. How do you handle supporting the staff? Are their functions, or we'd hate to lose the programming, we'd hate to lose the staff during that time. So how have you handled that in other houses?
Sure. And I do want to mention here as well that, our goal is not just to preserve a historic building, although of course that's important to us. Our goal is to really augment the programming or the ability of the staff who program the site to continue their work and to grow their work. And so everything that we do is kind of in service of that. But you're absolutely correct that the museum will likely have to close. Our sites kind of handle it. Of course, every single historic house is operated by a community community-based nonprofit like the Van Cortlandt House Museum that has a kind of a very specific kind of connection to their community and understanding of the needs that their programming provides. So it can differ across houses. But what I will say is a lot of virtual programming is very successful. We've had some historic houses that have really invested in mobile initiatives. And also in-school offerings is a really big way to engage with kind of new visitors who might actually come to the site once it reopens. That school engagement is really critical for the sites in general. Hosting field trips is a major component of their operations anyway. And so going into classrooms is obviously kind of a natural next step. But again, it kind of depends on each historic house and also the support that they receive from the community and the funding that they receive from the community, and the support that we're kind of able to garner. So we are fortunate that we still have about 2 years to kind of make plans, and we're going to have to move everything out of the house, all of these wonderful collections that Margaret is discussing. So it's definitely an invasive process, but we try to make it as painless a transition as possible.
So I see the National Society of Colonial Dames is on the call. They're the part for the folks who are from the community who are on the call. They're the organization that is kind of the umbrella organization that has the license to operate the house, and then provides some funding for the upkeep and support of the interiors. One of the concerns that this committee raised a few years ago was that was about programming and that and community connection. Because the National Society of Colonial Dames of New York doesn't have specific roots in the Bronx necessarily, right? And so a community advisory group was set up. I mean, I want to acknowledge that the programming that Margaret just described, that you just described, is so much better than what it was. And there's just been such a sea change, and that's nothing against Nick, but whatever you guys have figured out over there, it's awesome to see this kind of step change at the museum. The community advisory group was one of the outcomes of the previous discussion, and the purpose really of it was to try to connect the museum more closely, and maybe it's as a way of preparing, right, for this closure of the building itself. Can you give an update on where things stand with the community advisory group and kind of what the next action steps are for it?
Yeah, happy to. So the Community Advisory Committee has met regularly on a quarterly basis since October of 2024, its first meeting. The last meeting that we had was on January 21st of this year. We had hoped to meet in March, actually in person, but unfortunately we're not able to find a consensus date that worked for everyone. So right now the committee is on hiatus until the fall. But what was resolved at the last 2 meetings that we had, when I became the chair, I thought a really good sort of deliverable, if you will, for the Community Advisory Committee would be a community-informed strategic plan, which would help to sort of work the museum through that capital project with community input, in addition to the current programming, but certainly more in terms of we're looking at long-term strategic planning. And that's something that I intended to do as soon as I came in. But when I became the chair of the CAC, I thought it made a lot of sense to have the advisory committee sort of help lead the charge, right, on getting some of that strategic planning going. So we're going to reconvene in the fall. And that will be centered around that strategic planning process. And that next phase will focus on gathering community feedback to help inform that plan. So I've not got a strategy. I'm hoping that when we have that fall meeting, some of the folks on the Community Advisory Committee will, have some suggestions, and we'll hopefully maybe form some internal committees within the larger committee to sort of, based on interest and availability, because of course, all of these lovely folks are sort of pillars of their community, and they're very busy, and they're doing this on a volunteer basis. So, keeping that in mind, the plan is for in fall to get that strategic planning process going.
Okay. And then, so just to put it out there that, if you need support for we'll be putting together requests for expense items, for example, in January, February, March as part of the budget process, which is one of our main kind of activities. But these are the kinds of things that maybe that it would make a lot of sense for us to include as part of an ask in our expense budget requests, or just sending a letter of support for anything. or a grant proposal or something like that, we're happy to do it. I think.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Deb. I really appreciate that. We're definitely happy to keep the community board informed, and let's talk about that going forward. Sure, appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, but I know we did some funding, correct, Bob, when for the Enslaved Peoples project initially.
Yes.
To fund the school programming for that, so.
Yeah, I mean, it was relatively modest, but still,
Yeah,
it was additional funding.
yeah,
But I mean, maybe, something like perhaps having a facilitator or a consultant come in, to help start that strategic planning process, because obviously I have some experience, but I'm not an expert in that particular operational end of things. So that's maybe something that we would consider, if that's something that funding might be available for. I think that would be really helpful. Just throwing that out there.
yeah. Any questions from the committee?
Yeah,
yeah.
And I guess this is for Julietta. You have done an accessibility project in a historic house before, I take it, right? I mean, this is not the first time you're doing this, right?
No, actually. So the historic house is not ADA compliant, and it actually has not had a major capital project in about 25 years. So this would be kind of a really big deal for the historic house, which is fantastic. What we have done is provide some temporary accessibility measures. For example, a temporarily constructed wood ramp, which is currently at the museum to facilitate access to the visitor center area. And we've done some other kind of temporary measures, like installing a Moby mat on the non-ADA compliant surfaces, driveways, and other surfaces. But this would be the first major intervention to improve accessibility at the historic house, which will include ensuring that people with mobility disabilities will be able to get onto the first floor of the historic house, but also access things like the bathroom, which currently is not possible. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, but it's going to be a major endeavor. We're very, very excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it may be a lack of imagination on my part, but this seems like an awfully challenging project in a historic house that's more than 200 years old, almost 300 years old, to do this without interfering with the historic nature of the house. And I was hoping there was a model and you could say, sure, we know how to do this because we did it in such and such a place. So, I mean, first of all, you have to come up with a design, and then then there's the cost element, of course, which is a whole other issue. So I'm just curious, what's the process from this point on?
Sure. So I guess I should clarify here that we have done accessibility projects at other historic houses, but each historic house is tremendously different. This is a very specific place, as is each historic house. And of course, we are in constant communication with the Landmarks Preservation Commission, who ultimately has to approve any alterations to the outside of the landmarked building. And actually, this is, I believe, also an interior landmark. So there are some also approvals that we need for the interior. For example, upgrading HVAC, those things also need to pre-approved by the the Landmarks Preservation Commission. So obviously this is complex, which is kind of why we're here as the Historic House Trust, so that Margaret and her team can focus on programming and we can focus on more of the regulatory issues and some of the historic preservation best practices. All that being said, we would really like to avoid touching the primary facades of the historic museum, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but the primary facades are actually the front of the building that faces the decorative gate fence, that what you would think of now as the back of the house and the side of the house. So we are actually looking at trying to construct a lift, which is surprisingly the least invasive from a visual perspective. Construct a lift on the kind of non-historic facade of the building, the side of the building that already has had additions and some other alterations in the 1916-17 era. So that's kind of what we're exploring at the moment. But one of the reasons that we kind of needed to register additional funds is all of the best options are more expensive, and we want to figure out how to, design economically and strategically before we go and kind of present, no, this is the best option for what we have. We really need to weigh every single option. And it may be likely that we'll need additional funds depending on the solution. But I mean, the goal is to not have to go back and do this, right? The goal is to complete this intervention, and it functions very well for the museum well into the future.
Mhm. All right, so I mean, this is an ongoing discussion, in other words,
Very
Yeah.
much ongoing discussion, very, very much. And it's, if you're interested in historic preservation at all, I'd also love to, you know, explain a little bit more about some of the other projects, maybe at a future meeting that we're dealing with. But we've really considered all design solutions, from constructing a previously deconstructed historic addition to facilitate accessibility at the Dyckman Farmhouse Museum, to just installing a simple ramp, potentially at the Bartow Pell Mansion Museum, although that one's also a little bit challenging. So we've really looked at everything across our portfolio, and would be happy to kind of talk more about just kind of the historic preservation practice at large.
Mhm. All right, thank you for that.
One question about that, Julietta, is the historic steps and the gate. I don't think we talk enough about it, and you know, we just spent over an hour talking about a stadium that we have to tear down because we neglected it for 50 years or 100 years. From your point of view as a professional, can you talk a bit about the state of the gates and the steps and the kind of prioritization of those, the preserving of those, or whether they're historically significant?
I personally love the steps, but I will really, I will send this over to Stephanie. This is really kind of outside of the Van Cortlandt House Museum area and really squarely in the Van Cortlandt Park Alliance's purview. But I don't think that, I think we all love the steps, and in a perfect world would love to see, you know, some improvements to that area. But Stephanie, I'll kind of hand it over to you for that.
Stephanie, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm mute. Just had a little catastrophe in the kitchen, so. Parks has done some investigating to see what it would cost to repair the steps, and, you know, not surprisingly, it is quite expensive. So we have been trying to get some interest in funding it, but because there are so many other projects in Van Cortlandt Park and in the Bronx in general, it does not often rise to the level of being a priority. And so that's kind of unfortunate. But we keep trying. And so we love the steps and think that they really should be restored, and would open up so many possibilities for programming. So we continue to ask and see how we can move it forward.
So Stephanie, I hear you about the steps having to kind of compete with all these other parks initiatives, you know, that have a lot of heavy use and have big capital needs as well, right? There's just, the Van Cortlandt Park has a lot of capital projects that need to be done. The steps seem like they specifically, like, they're historic, and that potentially there may be grants or something. It surprises me, I guess what I'm saying is that the steps are not considered part of the Van Cortlandt House themselves, because they're historic as well. They're related to the entrance of the Van Cortlandt House, and they seem like they're essentially part of the gate. They're the entrance to the house. So is that a disadvantage? Is there a world where you get it reclassified so that Margaret or Julietta can work on getting funds for the renovation of those things, and it goes off of your plate? Is there a universe where any of that can happen, or are they kind of stuck at 37th on the list behind a lot of ball fields and a stadium?
It's a really interesting question. I don't know.
Definitely.
I don't have an answer to that.
I don't think that it needs to kind of be transferred over to collaborate on advocacy. So I think if this is something that the community is very interested in, the community board wants us to explore, Stephanie and I can definitely have a conversation and see what can come of it. Just in terms of advocacy and maybe visioning, it would be wonderful. So, you know, we'll have that conversation and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they bring up this really nice layer of history, right? Because they were added later, and that they are really, as you're pivoting the entrance of the house and thinking about it from a different angle, those steps and the gates start to become more relevant, and that kind of little entrance, whatever that fountain or whatever it once was, that's just at the base of the steps. But it's very Instagrammable, and Instagram will probably be gone by the time the steps are fixed. But one can hope. But that it would be great if we could find more resources historically that would, that would recognize the importance of the steps before they're so deteriorated they're not worth saving.
I think it's very interesting. We also kind of support historic preservation efforts across the city that kind of aren't under our purview just because we care about history in the city. So we can definitely look into what it might be to support temporary measures, perhaps even some kind of activation in terms of gardening. I think the major issue is just safety. So I think that would be kind of the number one issue to address, whether or not the steps are safe or not to use. So look, I totally agree. I love a historic landscape. The Van Cortlandt Park Alliance does an incredible job interpreting the historic landscape that is Van Cortlandt Park. Obviously, with kind of Nick's support as site historian at the Van Cortlandt House Museum. So very happy to continue that conversation. I think it's part of a larger push that we are all kind of engaged in, which is, what does this place mean? How is this place connected to the past? And how can we make people see who we are, where we come from? That whole question.
Yeah, well, and I think too is as they have gotten more and more deteriorated, they've gotten more and more closed off. And as they get more closed off, then people don't have any reason to go up them or near them. And so then they start to forget about them. And then once you start to forget about them, then it's just harder to, they don't feel as though they've lost something. And so I think, even just having partially open step, fixing parts of it or making pieces of it accessible again would be a big step in getting people up those steps and really experiencing that entrance or walkway to the house. Bob, you got a question?
Yeah, I remember having this conversation years ago. Yeah. And part of the problem is, just as you were alluding to, the area down below the steps is a wetland. It's not heavily trafficked. Very few people go through there because it doesn't really lead to anywhere. In the days when the steps were actually the entrance, that was different. But right now, there's not a whole lot of reason to be down there unless you're birding and looking for, the birds that like to hang out in swamps and so on. Whereas on the what is now the entrance, which is not the historic entrance, is far more heavily trafficked because it's the south end of the parade grounds. It's only yards from Broadway where there's an entrance into the park, etc. So it would have to be part of a larger reconfiguration of the areas. What I'm getting at, simply repairing the steps is not going to make the area more attractive. And it would be wonderful to do. But as we've also been discussing, there are a lot of other things in the park that would be wonderful to do too. So for now, I'm still grappling with the accessibility issue, and I think when we get past that point, then we can be a little more ambitious, perhaps.
I'm going to disagree with Bob and say that it's never too soon to start planning for trying to preserve the past. So. And one just last thing while we got Stephanie unmuted or almost unmuted, the nature center is right next door and is an underutilized space. Is there a world where the Van Cortlandt House Museum could use the nature center for educational programming, etc., or start to think about that as another space once as the house starts to having to close off for construction? I mean, I don't know if they want it. I know I'm just spitballing a little bit here, but I did want to kind of put that out there since we know it's underutilized and Parks doesn't have staff really to do more programming there, and that space is such a limited quantity that's so close. There might be an opportunity. I just want to throw it out there.
Deb, I think you're on fire tonight.
In a good way or a bad way.
No, these are great. These are great ideas. I think this is something that we'd have to bring back to the commissioner and talk about, because this is, the purview of urban park rangers. So we'd have to discuss. But it's fun idea.
I also just want to chime in that because we have a wonderful network of historic sites citywide, we've discussed at other sites, and this might be a possibility at the Van Cortlandt House Museum too, to just partner with the Bronx County Historical Society, even though it's not in the neighborhood, in the area, partner on some programming and things like that. So we do have a network that we can tap into, but of course, local is always better. So we'll continue to have that conversation.
Very cool.
And the Kingsbridge Historical Society, which is in the area and which is run now by Nick Dembowski, who was very much involved in the whole Enslaved Peoples Project way back when. But that's a great idea. Yeah, let's think of the other resources in the community. We have colleges in the community as well, universities. So
yeah, we've been making a lot of efforts to partner with a lot of the stakeholders in the community and within the park. And that's something that we're going to continue to expand upon. So I appreciate that. Yes, thank you.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody on the call? We're in the room? Yeah, quick.
Yeah, I do live by Van Cortlandt, so I do live by close by Van Cortlandt. My question is, are we going to do something, have an event in Van Cortlandt Museum, like let's say like the workshop or something, like we do like the workshop in Van Cortlandt. Van Cortlandt.
Yeah, we do a number of different public programs and workshops. We're actually going to be doing a number of hands-on workshops relating to the process of creating textiles. So that will include weaving, spinning, natural dyes, and there will be programming for folks of all ages, for sure. So there's going to be lots of different ways to engage.
Also, Margaret and I have not talked about this because we're still 2 years out, but we find with our other historic preservation projects that bringing people into the process of restoration is a great way to engage people in the sense of place that they have. So we'd be very interested in running workshops about, historic trades and what that looks like in the city of New York.
All right, cool. Well, thank you both for being on the call tonight. This is really educational, informative, and it's good to see you. It's been too long.
It's great.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Anytime. I love talking about historic houses, so can do it all day.
Thanks. I will note that if I have a gap in my agenda. All right. Have a good night, you two.
Thanks so much.
Good night. Thank you so much. Take care.
So moving on, any old business?
No, everything's done with the Hartford store side, right?
Yeah, it's off to the printer. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's exciting. Heck, there, I just needed it to look up somebody's email address just yesterday. So,
okay.
Any new business? I knew it. Jody's hand is up.
Of course. Hi, everybody. Jody Colon, Friends of Spite and Dival. I just wanted to give you an update of what we've been up to since April. I've just crunched all our numbers. So far this year in Henry Hudson Park, we've been in the park 18 volunteer days with 288 volunteers total, and have put in 755 stewardship hours. So we ended up shoveling a lot of snow. April, we hosted 2 student classes and have been raking, weeding, pruning, etc. Of course, we're still having trouble with vandals. I did send an email with photographs of someone I caught digging up our lilies. And I do have permission to put flyers on the fence, and those have been, now it's just a contest to see who could last longer, me printing and posting flyers or the vandal who tears them down every night. So unfortunately, without enough PEP officers, response times are very long, if ever. So I'm going to again say, please keep putting pep on your budget requests because we definitely need more officers. People know there's no consequences for vandalism. But my big news is, after 5 years of telling you all the things we've been doing in Shorefront Park, we did a really big push this year. We were in the park 21 days, had over 100 volunteers who put in an average of 3 hours a day. And so that's 315 service hours. And we finally finished plugging all the potholes in the eroded trails and officially reopened, took the barricades down with parks on Saturday, June 6th. There's a nice article in the Riverdale Press about it. That was a 5-year labor of love, actually kicked off by a community board meeting where you hosted Christy King talking about Forever Wild Parks. And then I reached out to her right then, and she came and visited. We kicked the bridge contractors out of the park because they were outside their permit area. And it was a giant labor of love with help from the Natural Areas Conservancy. They will be bringing the Student Conservation Association into the park this summer to finish repairing the trails. The trails are walkable now, but not erosion proof. So they will be installing what are called check steps. They're logs that we source from the park or they'll bring in to hold back the soil. So when we get these crazy heavy rains, the trails aren't washing out again. But you can now walk from one end of Edsel Avenue to the other through the park, under the bridge. You can go down to the pond. And the pond project that took 20 plus years of budget requests seems to be moving along slowly. I did notice that they put pink ribbons up delineating the edge of the wetland, but I feel those are not in the right place because the wetland was filled in by the bridge contractors. So the wetland actually originally is bigger than what they've marked. So I just wanted to give you a quick update. And for those of you who haven't met me or seen me before, I am a volunteer. So those 40 plus days that were in both parks is how I'm spending my retirement, helping the parks. But it's great because I've had so much support from the Parks Department and from other partners like NAC and the students at Riverdale Kingsbridge Academy. They've been incredible doing their service hours in the park. Without them, we wouldn't have been this far. So that's my update if you have any questions. And I'll be in the park all through the summer in both parks, at least one day a week in each park.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jody, for all of that. I know it's been an ongoing process with the park. I saw some of your pictures that you sent. I haven't had a chance to get over there myself, but I'll go over to visit. But the park looks awesome. And and it's one of those little forgotten gems. I think a lot of people don't realize that there's an excellent little area down there where you feel like you've left the city behind, and it's yet so close. So I'm excited that you are feeling as though this project is done. So I know you've really been pushing to make sure that those trails are accessible for a long time.
Yeah, what was really exciting is on the National Trails Day, June 6th, we did a ribbon cutting to reopen the trail that had been closed because it was hazardous. And over 60 people showed up. The Rangers did their first ever program in Shorefront Park ever. And half of the people didn't even know the park existed. They were my Henry Hudson Park volunteers. So it was really exciting to remember how beautiful the park is, even though I still see all the invasives and busted trails that we still need to fix. But if the community board committee or anybody would like a personal walk through the park, Deb knows how to get in touch with me. Happy to give you a private tour.
Now, is it officially designated Forever Wild Park? I feel like it's on some lists, but not on others.
Yes, it is officially designated Forever Wild. We did learn way back in 2021 when Christy King spoke at the committee meeting that they had changed the criteria in, I think, 2016 7 or 9 to include smaller parks. So Shorefront Park is Forever Wild. It is trails. It has big boulders in it that you can sit on. And the great thing is, as the 5 years have gone by, more and more people are in the park. I used to be there, you know, just with volunteers. So people are discovering it and using it, and protecting it is Forever Wild. You know, as soon as we opened the trails, the signs were graffitied, but Parks is working on cleaning them. So
Are there signs that say that it's Forever Wild?
there's signs that say natural area restoration in progress. So those were vandalized. But I already am planning the next 5 years. So
Well, good. Congratulations on all the success, Jody.
Yeah,
You
congratulations.
worked hard.
thank you so much. It's nice to have had such a interest from the community and the students who were willing to like roll 200-pound logs, even though they didn't think they could. You know, like that was the most gratifying thing, is bringing students into the park in this wild place in the Bronx that they didn't even know existed. That's only, you know, blocks from where they live and go to school. So, so thank you, and thank you to the community board for being interested in my updates for all these years that this has been going on.
I think we're still waiting on a presentation from Parks on the Shorefront Park pond wall restoration, correct?
Yeah, it's still listed as a proposed project. I haven't seen it move over to in the capital tracker.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jody. Ava, your hand is up.
Hi, Deb. How are you? I know we spoke briefly earlier. I just had two quick points I wanted to make about Ford Independence Park.
Yeah.
The first is there, as you know, and as others know here, there's a really nice row of a promenade of oak trees going up and down the length of the park. Unfortunately, as some of those have gotten older, they've died or they've been cut down. And so 6 out of 27 of them need to be replanted at this point. And I think about the old saying, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time to plant a tree is today. Yeah, and to your point, Deb, some of those stumps have acquired a pedigree. I mean, they are old. So it's been 3, 4, 5 years, some of those stumps. So I guess I'm wondering what it would take to simply get 6 oak trees planted to replace the 6 empty tree pits and that are there now.
Yeah, that one I'm gonna have to do some follow-up on. It's gonna take a bit of follow-up. Because I don't know where, I just don't know where we are in terms of tree planting within parks.
Sure.
I know that there was some budgetary money a couple of years ago for heat island trees that led to a bunch of trees being planted in Washington's Walk and Goulden and Jerome Park and parts of the reservoir. And there had been a plan to plant trees in Fort Independence, and those trees I think were cut when there were budget shortfalls with this tree island program. That said, I don't know where we are on the list in terms of getting these specific trees replaced, but I have a note to try to figure out that question. Because you raise it, I had totally gotten tree blind to the fact that the trees were missing.
Yeah, no,
they're huge stumps, and so those stumps require special equipment to remove.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole other thing.
Sure. Well, so some of the stumps have been removed already, which is great, because I wonder maybe it could be done in a staged manner where the stumps that are removed could be replaced. And I think in one of the tree pits, an acorn found its way in there and is already growing a tree. So
the trees are on it. Excellent.
Yeah, the trees are on it. Yeah.
The trees are working on it.
All right. So that was one thing. The second thing is kind of related to the trees. As you know, there's a sprinkler in the park, Deb. There's something about the drainage there where we have our own mini Niagara Falls here. on Sedgwick Avenue, where the sprinkler kind of has actually carved out a stream, like a riverbed, actually, over time. And so the water from the sprinkler flows unabated out of the sprinkler over the wall. And then the problem is that all the grass gets really, really boggy, and then it continues to flow into this one specific tree lining Sedgwick. And I'm a little worried about the mosquitoes because, you know, you just basically have a swamp there. And I'm also worried about that tree because it just gets a tremendous amount of water all summer long. And I hope it doesn't get waterlogged and fall down, basically. So I'm wondering, is it possible to just, you know,
the size of it,
we just maybe put and I know this is, we talked about that, maybe sandbags aren't the right solution, but I mean, surely there is some small intervention that can be done prior to the complete reconstruction of the park.
Yeah, so for context, for folks who are on the call who may not be aware, so Fort Independence Playground is slated for major reconstruction. That is scheduled to start in the spring of 2027. So imminent, roughly. But Ava, to your, and that will involve replacement of all of this drainage. It will all be redone, and that the playground will be recontoured so that it won't have any drainage back onto the sidewalk again. That was one of the things that were called out before during the community input session for the playground. So they're addressing that as part of the reconstruction.
Okay.
So that'll definitely get done then. But in the meantime, is a good question. I think we have to go have Joe Magnieri do a site visit, who's the parks district manager for maintenance and operations. Have to have him come just take a look and see what's possible.
Okay.
I think that's probably the next step, but I can reach out to the board office and they can we can facilitate a visit by parks to take a look.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm glad to hear the reconstruction is going through. I knew there was some back and forth on that, and some people were not happy with it. So it sounds like it's happening, which is great. Again, I am in no way trying to create a capital project that has to be undone in a year. I just thought, you know, maybe a couple of bags of dirt, you know, could solve this problem in the short term.
Well, or maybe there's a manner of cleaning the drain or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Do it on a temporary basis for the rest of the summer. That could help. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, Deb. So maybe there's something really simple. Anyway, thanks for hearing me out. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on the call, Evan. Appreciate it. Any other new business? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, you do.
And a second? All right. So the meeting is adjourned. It is 9:16.
Oh, it's been over 2 hours.
Ah.
Welcome to the Parks Committee.
But what a thorough meeting.
Oh, that was a good meeting. Yeah.
This was a short meeting. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night, Jody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
See you out tomorrow in Wakefield, last meeting of the season.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow's the last meeting of the